1 week after the incident in Section 12. Unipark stood at the window of Station Helix 7's observation gallery and watched the stars wheel past. Her body had healed with the remarkable speed that humans were famous for. The damage to her respiratory system had faded within days. The frostbite on her extremities had reversed itself, and the doctors had released her with notes in her file that read like something from a horror story about unkillable monsters. But Yuna did not feel like a monster anymore. The observation gallery was empty at this hour, which was why she had chosen it. She needed time to think about everything that had changed and everything that still might. "You should not be alone." The voice came from behind her, and Yuna turned to find Torvin and Morel standing in the doorway, their forms outlined by the soft lighting of the corridor. "I am not hiding," Yuna said. "We did not say you were," Morel replied. Moving to stand beside her at the window, Torvin joined them, his crystalline body catching the starlight and scattering it into rainbows across the floor. They stood together in silence for a long moment, three beings from three different worlds, watching the universe turn around them. "Commanding Tutor Civics says you refused early advancement," Torvin said finally. "I did. Commandant Zahn personally recommended you," Morel added. "That is an honor most cadets would never receive." "I know. Then why did you refuse?" Yuna did not answer immediately. She watched a supply ship dock at the far end of the station, its running lights blinking in patterns that her human eyes could barely detect. "Because I would have to leave the cohort," she said quietly. "And I am not ready for that." Torvin's harmonic shifted to something warm. "That is not a strategic decision." "No," Yuna agreed. "It is not." Footsteps announced the arrival of others before Yuna could say more. She turned to find the rest of Cohort 12 filing into the observation gallery. Cadets from a dozen different species who had no logical reason to be awake at this hour. Threk was there, his armored form moving with surprising quietness. Syrah stood beside him, her four eyes reflecting the starlight. Varix had recovered from her ordeal and stood with her feathered crest fully extended. Drex and Zora and others whose names Yuna was still learning came to stand with their cohort, filling the gallery with the soft sounds of breathing and movement and life. "What is this?" Yuna asked. "We wanted to talk to you," Morel said. "All of us? About what?" Torvin stepped forward, his crystalline structure ringing with carefully composed harmonics. "We have been watching you since the day you arrived at the academy," he said. "We watched you fight the Garth, and we watched you save us in the tunnels. But we never asked you the question that mattered most." Yuna felt her heart beating faster. "What question?" Morel moved to stand beside Torvin, his antennae extended toward Yuna with gentle attention. "Why do you do it?" he asked softly. "The fighting, the pain, the impossible acts that should kill you but somehow do not. Why?" The gallery fell silent, every eye and sensor and perceptive organ in the room focused on the human who had terrified them and saved them in equal measure. Yuna stood in the center of that attention and felt something crack inside her chest, not pain, but pressure. The pressure of carrying something along for too long. "You want to know about humans," she said, and her voice was steady despite everything. "You want to know why we are the way we are?" "Yes," Morel said. Simply. Yuna looked out at the stars for a long moment, gathering thoughts she had never shared with anyone. "We evolved on a world that wanted to kill us every single day," she began. "Our sun bombarded us with radiation. Our climate shifted between ice ages and heat waves. And every other living thing on our planet was either trying to eat us or competing with us for food." She turned to face her cohort, meeting their eyes one by one. "We should have died out 100 times over, but we did not. Because we learned to do something that no other species on our planet could do. We learned to keep going. Persistence hunting," Torvin said, his harmonics reflecting understanding. I read about this in your species files. It is more than hunting, Una said. It is how we think, how we live, how we love. We attach ourselves to things and we refuse to let go. Even when logic says we should. Even when survival says we should. Even when everything in the universe says stop, we keep going. Her voice grew rougher, carrying the weight of things she had never spoken aloud, but that same stubbornness made us dangerous. To ourselves, to each other, to everything around us. We fought wars that killed millions. We destroyed species that could never come back. We poisoned our own world because we could not stop wanting more. She took a breath that shuddered slightly. I joined the coalition because I wanted to prove that humans could be more than our history. I wanted to show the galaxy that we are not just predators who happen to walk upright. I wanted to be better than what my species has been. Morel stepped closer to her, his small form radiating warmth despite his size. Is that why you saved us? He asked. To prove something. Una looked down at him, at the Kessethi who had held her while she wept. And something in her expression softened. No, she said. When I ran into that tunnel, I was not thinking about proving anything to anyone. I was thinking about you, about Torvin, about the people who sat with me when no one else would. I was thinking that you were in danger, and I could not let you die. She paused, searching for words that could express what she meant. The thing about humans is not just that we endure, she said finally. It is that we endure for each other. We run prey to exhaustion because we need to feed our families. We survive impossible conditions because someone is waiting for us to come home. We keep fighting long after we should be dead because there is someone who needs us to live. Her eyes met Morel's, then swept across the cohort. I did not save you because I am a Deathworlder, she said. I saved you because you are my friends. That is the part they do not tell you about humans. We do not just refuse to die for ourselves. We refuse to die for the people we love. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of processing and understanding, and the quiet revolution of minds that have finally seen something. Clearly, for the first time, Morel moved first. He crossed the remaining distance between himself and Una, reached up, and pressed his forehead gently against hers. This is how my people say we trust someone with our lives, he explained. And with our hearts. Una closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his touch and the absolute sincerity behind it. When she opened them again, Torvum was moving forward. His crystalline body chimed with frequencies that his translator rendered as, among the Sheth, this is how we acknowledge family. He touched one of his fasted hands to Una's shoulder, and light scattered through her in patterns that felt like being wrapped in something ancient and beautiful. One by one, the others followed. Thrak pressed his mandibles gently against her palm. The Borth gesture of respect between equals. Sura blinked each of her 4 eyes in sequence while touching her hand to her chest, a species sign of deep connection. Varix brushed her feathered crest against Una's cheek. Drex and Zura and all the others offered their own species. Gestures of acceptance and belonging and love. Una stood in the center of it all, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy, and finally let herself feel what she had spent years denying. She was not alone. She had never had to be alone. She had simply been too afraid to believe that anyone would want her, but they did. They wanted her not despite being human, but with full knowledge of everything humans were. And they chose her anyway when the last gesture was complete. The cohort stood together in the observation gallery, bound by something stronger than regulations or training schedules or the arbitrary boundaries of species. Thank you, Una whispered. And the words were not enough, but they were all she had. Thank you for seeing me. Morel squeezed her hand. We always saw you, Una. We just needed you to stop running long enough to notice. Outside the windows, the stars continued their eternal wheel. Somewhere among them, Earth spun on. carrying the weight of human history and the hope of human potential. But here, in a small room full of aliens who had become family, one of Earth's children finally stopped running, and for the first time in her life, Una Park felt like she was home. The tunnel ahead of Una screamed with the sound of escaping atmosphere. It was a high-pitched whistle that grew louder with every step she took, and her suit's sensors were already flashing. Warnings about the pressure differential she was approaching Section 12 had suffered a cascading failure. Something had impacted the outer hull. Probably debris from the asteroid mining operations that kept Station Helix 7 supplied. And the ancient seals that should have contained the breach had failed one after another. 3 cadets were trapped in a pocket of rapidly thinning air, and the rescue teams were 12 minutes away. Morel had told her that one of those cadets was Torvin. Una did not slow down. Her suit was rated for brief vacuum exposure, maybe 2 minutes before the seals began to degrade, and she was using up those seconds with every stride. But the math did not work any other way if she waited. Torvin and the others would die if she went now. They might live. She reached the section boundary and slammed her palm against the emergency access panel. Cadet Park. Do not enter Section 12. Civex's voice crackled through her communicator. That is a direct order. Rescue teams are 12 minutes out, Una replied. Her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. What species are trapped in there? A pause. Then, 1 Sheth, 1 Nivari, 1 Kesathi. Una's blood went cold. Kesathi could not survive more than 6 minutes. In vacuum, their respiratory systems collapsed without constant atmospheric pressure. There was no way that rescue teams would reach them in time. Then you should probably court-martial me later, Una said. Because I am going in now. She overrode the safety lockout and pushed through the door into Section 12. The pressure drop hit her like a physical blow. Her suit compensated as best it could, but she could feel the difference immediately. The way her lungs had to work harder. The way every breath became a conscious effort. Her helmet display showed the pressure declining in real time. And it was not good. She found them 30 meters into the section, huddled in a junction where 3 tunnels met. Torvin's crystalline body was pressed protectively around the smaller Kesathi, trying to shield him from the cold that was seeping through everything. And the Nivari, a cadet named Verix, whose feathered crest had gone limp with fear, was pressing emergency patches against the wall that kept sprouting new leaks. Una, Torvin's voice crackled through the cum, harmonics shattered by his own distress. You should not be here. Too late for that, Una replied, already assessing the situation with eyes trained by years of survival on a harsh colony. World breach was too large to seal with the patches they had available, but there was another option. Get into that service alcove, she ordered, pointing to a small recess in the tunnel wall. All 3 of you, now. They moved, too frightened to argue with the certainty in her voice. Una stripped off her emergency pack and began pulling out everything it contained. Sealant foam, thermal blankets, her own backup atmosphere cartridges. What are you doing? Verix asked. Making you a bubble. Una replied. She worked faster than she had ever worked in her life, her hands moving with precision despite the cold that was seeping through her gloves. She sprayed sealant around the edges of the alcove, creating an airtight seal. She connected her backup cartridges to a makeshift valve system that would maintain pressure. Inside the small space, she wrapped thermal blankets over everything to prevent the seals from cracking. In the cold, it took 4 minutes. In that time, the section's atmosphere dropped to nearly nothing. Her suit's warnings changed from yellow to red Morel. The Kesathi trapped in the alcove had only 2 minutes of tolerance left. Get in, Una said, pushing the last of the thermal blankets into place. What about you? Torvin asked. I will be right behind you. It was not true. There was barely enough room in the alcove for 3 bodies. And the atmosphere cartridges she had used were her only extras. Her suit now had 6 minutes of internal atmosphere remaining, and she was already feeling the effects of the thin air she had been breathing. "Yuna," Torvin said, his harmonics rising with understanding. "You cannot get in the alcove." "Torvin, we will not leave you." "You will," Yuna said, and she smiled behind her helmet, "because if you do not, Morel dies." And I did not run into a depressurizing tunnel section just to watch him suffocate. She pushed them through the seal one by one, Barracks first, then Morel, then Torvin. And when they were inside, she pressed the sealant applicator against the opening and closed them in the last thing. Torvin saw through the transparent thermal blankets. Was Yuna sinking to her knees? As her suit's atmosphere ran out in the operations center of Station Helix 7, Commanding Tutor Cyrix watched the sensor feeds with scales that had gone completely black, the velvety color of grief. She had seen the human enter Section 12. Against orders, she had watched her vital signs spike into ranges that should indicate imminent death. She had observed her construct, a survival shelter for her trapped cohort members, while her own life support failed. Now she watched Yuna Park collapse in a decompressed tunnel, her body beginning to shut down from oxygen deprivation. The rescue teams were still 4 minutes out. "Get them there faster," Civix ordered. "We cannot," her operations officer replied helplessly. "Then we watch." They watched Yuna's vital signs dropped into critical ranges. Her heart rate slowed as her body tried to conserve what oxygen remained. Her core temperature fell as the cold of space seeped through her failing suit, but she did not die. Human physiology was remarkable in ways that continued to surprise the galaxy. Their bodies could survive conditions that would kill most species instantly, not indefinitely, but long enough to matter, long enough for rescue teams to arrive. They found her unconscious but alive, her suit's seals finally beginning to crack under the pressure differential. They found the 3 cadets in her improvised shelter, terrified but unharmed, protected by the human who had traded her own safety for theirs. Morel was the one who held Yuna's head when they brought her out. His telepathic abilities were useless. She was too deeply unconscious for him to sense, but he reached out anyway, projecting warmth and gratitude and something that he had never felt for anyone outside his own family. He projected love, and somewhere in the darkness where Yuna had fallen, something received it. The medical bay was quiet. When Yuna woke up, she opened her eyes to soft lighting and the hum of life support systems and the worried face of a Kesethi who had not left her side in 16 hours. "Morel," she said, and her voice was rough from the damage the cold had done to her throat. "You should not have done that," Morel said, and there were tears on his face. Translucent drops that Kesethi produced only in moments of overwhelming emotion. "You would have died." "Yes," Morel agreed. "And so would you. You almost did. Your heart stopped twice." Yuna considered this information with strange calm. But it started again, because the medical team refused to let it stop. She turned her head to look around the room. Torvin was there, his crystalline structure dim with exhaustion, but present Varix huddled in a corner, her feathered crest rising when she saw Yuna awake and beyond them, visible through the window of her private room. The rest of Cohort 12 waited in the corridor, all of them, every single cadet who had been assigned to train with her, standing vigil for a human they had been taught to fear. "Why are they here?" Yuna asked. Morel took her hand in his smaller ones, careful not to disturb the medical sensors attached to her skin. "Because you are one of us," he said simply. "You were always one of us, and we should have shown you that sooner." Yuna closed her eyes, and something that had been locked inside her for years finally broke free. She wept, not from pain, not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being seen, Morel stayed with her through all of it. And when the tears finally stopped, he was still there. "Rest now," he said. "We will be here when you wake up." She believed him. 3 weeks passed after the combat assessment, and the academy settled into its usual rhythm of training and study. Cohort 12 had become something unexpected, where other training groups divided along species lines, forming clusters of similar beings who understood each other's needs and customs. Cohort 12 had begun to orbit around something none of them had anticipated. They orbited around Unipark. It started with Torvin and Morel, who kept their promise to sit with her in the common area every day. Then Freck joined them, the Gorath who had lost to her in the arena, and who had developed a strange respect for the human who had refused to stay down. Then a Pelian named Sarah, who had watched the fight and found herself curious rather than afraid. Then others one by one, until nearly half the cohort had formed the habit of gathering near the human during meals and free periods. They did not always speak to her directly. Sometimes they simply sat nearby, working on their studies or talking among themselves, but they were there. And that presence meant something that none of them fully understood. Una noticed, of course she noticed, but she said nothing about it, accepting their company with the same quiet composure she brought to everything else. Commandant Zun noticed too. She had extended her evaluation period twice already, telling her oversight committee that the Academy's methods required more thorough observation. In truth, she was watching Una. She had accessed the human service record through her command authority and found a story that explained much about the cadet's behavior. Una had grown up on a colony world called New Bizon, a harsh planet at the edge of Coalition space, where human settlers had carved out a life. Through sheer determination, she had enlisted in the Coalition military at 17, the minimum age allowed, and had requested assignment to the Galactic Academy, specifically her psychological evaluation. Noted that she had a strong desire to prove human worth to the galactic community, and difficulty forming close relationships due to perceived rejection. The evaluator had cleared her for service, but added a personal note that reads simply, "This one is carrying something heavy. Watch her." Zin closed the file and made a decision that would change everything. One evening, after the training day had ended, Una returned to her quarters to find something waiting on her desk. It was a data crystal containing a simple text document. She activated it and read the words that appeared. "You are not responsible for what your species has done, only for what you choose to do now. Signed, C-Zone." Una stared at the message for a long time. Then she closed it and sat in the darkness of her room, thinking about things she had never allowed herself to think about before. The next morning, Morel found her in the common area earlier than usual. She was staring out the window at the stars, her breakfast untouched, and her emotional state was turbulent in ways that made him hesitate. "Something happened," he said, taking his usual seat across from her. "Someone sent me a message." Una replied without looking away from the stars. "Was it threatening?" "No," she said, and her voice held something that might have been wonder. "It was kind." Morel did not probe further. He had learned that humans revealed themselves in their own time, and pushing only made them retreat behind walls that took weeks to lower again. Torvin arrived next, followed by Threk and Sarah, and the others who had made this corner of the common area their unofficial meeting place. The conversation flowed around Una as it always did, including her without demanding participation. She listened more than she spoke. But Morel noticed that her attention was different today. She was watching them, not with the guarded wariness he had sensed before, but with something softer, something hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. "Training exercise today," Threk announced, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Exterior maintenance tunnels, full environmental suits. Team coordination assessment." "I hate suits," Sarah complained, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. They never fit Pelian bodies correctly. Better than vacuum. Torvin pointed out reasonably. The conversation continued. Small complaints and jokes and the casual bonding that military cadets had engaged in for as long as there had been militaries. Una laughed at something Threk said. A genuine sound that surprised everyone, including herself. Morel felt her emotional state shift like a sunrise breaking through clouds. She was beginning to believe that she might belong here. The training exercise began 3 hours later. Cohort 12 assembled in the staging area outside the maintenance tunnels. Each cadet wearing an environmental suit calibrated to their species' needs. The tunnels ran throughout Station Helix 7's exterior hull, allowing maintenance crews to access critical systems without EVA procedures. They were also used for training exercises because they could be isolated and made dangerous in controlled ways. Commanding Tutor Civics briefed them on their objectives. You will work in teams of 4 to navigate the tunnel network and retrieve beacon units from specified locations, she explained. Her scales a businesslike gray. Your suits will maintain atmosphere, but several sections of the tunnels will be depressurized to simulate emergency conditions. And your team's success depends on cooperation between different species capabilities. The cohort divided into teams by chance or design. Una found herself grouped with Morel, a Corvan named Drex, who specialized in engineering, and a Valfin named Zura, whose echolocation abilities would be useful in the tunnels. Darkness. They entered the maintenance access together, their suits' helmet lights cutting through the shadows. Stay close, Una said, taking point. These tunnels are a maze if you do not know them. You have been here before, Drex asked. I studied the station schematics during my first week, Una admitted. It seemed useful. They moved through the tunnels efficiently, working together better than any of them had expected. Drex handled the technical aspects of retrieving their assigned beacons while Zura guided them through darkened sections, and Morel monitored the emotional states of the team for signs of stress or panic. Una did everything else. She carried equipment. When the smaller species struggled with the weight, she solved problems that stumped the others. She kept them calm when the tunnels groaned with the sounds of space pressing against the station's hull. They had retrieved 3 of their 5 beacons when everything went wrong. The alert came through their suit. Communications first. Civex's voice carrying an edge of genuine concern that training exercises never warranted. All teams halt and maintain positions. We have an actual emergency in Section 12. Repeat. This is not a drill. That is near us, Drex said, his translator rendering his worry into flat syllables. Zura's echolocation was already reaching out, trying to sense what was happening in the tunnel ahead. Breach, she said suddenly. I can hear atmosphere venting. Section 12 is losing pressure. Who else is in Section 12? Una demanded. Morel closed his eyes and extended his telepathic range as far as it would go. He felt the fear first. 3 bright points of terror in the direction Zura had indicated. And then he felt something beneath the fear that made his blood run cold. One of those terrified minds was familiar. Torvin, he whispered. Torvin is in there, with 2 others. I can feel them. Una was moving before he finished speaking. Wait, Drex called after her. Our suits are not rated for vacuum exposure. Mine is, Una replied over her shoulder. Stay here. I will be back. She disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel ahead, running toward the section that was bleeding its atmosphere into space. Morel felt her emotional state. As she ran, there was no fear. There was no hesitation. There was only a single burning certainty that someone she had come to care about was in danger, and that she would reach them no matter what it cost her. She's going to die, Drex said. His voice hollow. Morel shook his head. No, she is not. How can you know that? Morel looked in the direction Yuna had gone, feeling her determination blazing like a star in the darkness. Because humans do not know how to give up, he said softly. That is what makes them terrifying, and that is what makes them wonderful. They waited in the darkness of the tunnels, and Morel reached out with his mind to follow what happened next. Word spread through Station Helix 7 faster than light through vacuum. By the time the second match of the combat assessment began, the observation gallery had filled beyond capacity. Cadets from 6 different training cohorts pressed against the windows, their various bodies creating a strange mosaic of scales, and fur and crystalline structures and things that defied easy description. They had not come to watch the current fight. They had come because they had heard about the human Shibita Gorth. A Navari cadet was explaining to a newcomer, her feathered crest rising with excitement. Not just beat him, but dominated him after he nearly killed her 3 times. Impossible. The newcomer replied, I was there, the Navari insisted. I watched it happen. Commanding Tutor Civex had moved on to evaluating other members of Cohort 12. But she noticed the growing crowd with scales that flickered toward amber, the color of mild annoyance. She said nothing about it because technically the gallery was open to all cadets during training. Ours Torvin remained at the window where he had been, standing since the humans' fight ended 2 hours ago. His crystalline body caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the floor as he processed what he had witnessed. The mathematics of the fight did not make sense to him. He had calculated the force of the Gorth's blows and compared them to the known structural limits of human bone and tissue. She should have broken. She had not broken. You are still thinking about her, Morel said, appearing beside him. The Kesethi was small even by the standards of his species, barely reaching Torvin's waist. But his telepathic sensitivity made him one of the most valuable cadets in their cohort. I am trying to understand, Torvin admitted, his body humming with frustrated harmonics. The data does not support what I observed. That is because you are measuring the wrong things, Morel replied, before Torvin could ask what he meant. A new presence entered the gallery. Commandant Zun moved through the crowd with the slow dignity of advanced age. Her Navari form hunched slightly, but her eyes as sharp as polished metal. She was not assigned to Station Helix 7. She was here as an observer, evaluating the Academy's training methods for a coalition oversight committee, and she had specifically requested to watch the humans' assessment. Which one was she? Zan asked, stopping beside Torvin and Morel as if she had known them her entire life. Torvin's harmonic shifted to respect as he replied, She has already completed her match. Commandant, I know, Zan said. I reviewed the recording, but I wanted to speak with those who witnessed it directly. Morel's antennae twitched. You want to know what we felt? It was not a question. Zhen's wrinkled face arranged itself into something that might have been approval. Clever one, aren't you, Kesley? I sensed her emotions throughout the fight, Morel said, and his voice carried the weight of something he was still trying to understand. She was not angry, not afraid, not even determined in the way warriors usually are during combat. Then what was she? Torvin asked. Happy, Morel said, and the words seemed to disturb him. She was happy. Not because she was hurting the Garth, but because she was testing herself, proving something to herself that no one else could see. Zayn nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the arena below where 2 other cadets were engaged in their own assessment. Humans have a saying that I encountered during my early career, she said. They say that which does not kill me makes me stronger. That is objectively untrue, Torvin replied. Damage reduces capability. It does not enhance it. For your species. Yes, Zen agreed. But humans are different. And I do not mean merely in their physical resilience. She turned to face both cadets directly, her ancient eyes holding knowledge that spanned centuries. Their world tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. And they survived not by becoming the strongest or the fastest or the most armored, but by refusing to accept defeat and by growing stronger from every wound that failed to end them. That sounds terrifying, Morel admitted. It is, Zuen said simply. But it is also beautiful if you learn to see it correctly. She left them with that thought, making her way to a private viewing alcove where she could observe without being observed. Torvin and Morel remained at the window as the training day continued. They watched the other fights with diminished interest, their minds returning again and again to the human who had confused everything they thought they understood about combat. When the final assessment of the day ended, they made their way to the Academy's common area, where cadets from all cohorts gathered to eat and study and form the bonds that would carry them through their careers. Yuna was there. She sat alone at a table in the corner, her tray of human-compatible food barely touched as she read something on a datapad. The cuts on her face had been sealed with medical adhesive, thin lines that would fade within a day or two, and she had changed into a fresh uniform that hid whatever bruising remained beneath. The common area was crowded, but the tables nearest to her were empty. No one would sit close to the Deathworlder. Morel felt her emotions from across the room. They were complicated and layered in ways that made his head hurt. Loneliness, carefully suppressed, sat beneath a surface of calm acceptance. And beneath that was something older and deeper that he could not quite identify. We should speak with her, he said to Torvin. Why? The chef asked, genuine confusion coloring his harmonics. Because no one else will. They crossed the common area together, aware of the eyes that followed them, and stopped at Yuna's table. She looked up from her datapad with an expression that revealed nothing. May we sit? Morel asked for a long moment. Yuna simply stared at them. Then something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of surprise quickly hidden. And she nodded. Thank you, Morel said, as they took seats across from her. Torvin's crystalline body chimed softly as he settled, a harmonic that his translator rendered as a polite greeting. You fought well today, Torvin offered, uncertain how to begin a conversation with someone so alien. I survived, Yuna replied. That is different from fighting well. Morel leaned forward slightly. I sensed your emotions during the match. Yuna's expression did not change, but Morel felt a spike of wariness lance through her carefully maintained calm. Kassathi telepathy, she said. I read about your species during orientation. I do not share what I sense without permission, Morel assured her quickly. But I wanted you to know that I understand you are not enjoying violence itself. Most people do not make that distinction. Yuna said quietly, I am not most people. Something almost like a smile touched the corner of Yuna's mouth before disappearing. No, I suppose you are not. Torvin's harmonics shifted to a frequency that indicated curiosity. I calculated the force of the impacts you absorbed, and I cannot reconcile them with your continued functionality. How is this possible? Human bone density, Yuna explained. And our muscles attach to our skeletons differently than most species. But mostly it is stubbornness. Stubbornness is not a physical attribute. For humans, it might as well be. They talked for nearly an hour as the common area slowly emptied around them. Torvin asked technical questions about human physiology that Yuna answered with patient detail. Morel listened more than he spoke, sensing the layers of her emotional state and the way they shifted as the conversation continued. The loneliness began to recede, replaced by cautious hope and something that felt almost like gratitude. When the lights dimmed to signal the beginning of sleep cycle, they finally rose to leave. Thank you, Yuna said. And the words carried more weight than such simple sounds should hold. For sitting with me. We will sit with you again tomorrow, Morel replied, and it was not a question. Yuna nodded. And this time the smile that touched her face did not disappear quite so quickly as they walked toward their quarters. Torvin's harmonic shifted to confusion. Why did she thank us? We did nothing unusual. Morel glanced back toward the corner where Yuna was gathering her things alone. She has been at the academy for 2 years, he said softly. And I believe that may be the first time anyone has chosen to sit with her. Torvin's body rang with a discordant note of distress. That is cruel. Yes, Morel agreed. It is. He did not add that he had felt something else beneath Yuna's carefully guarded emotions. Something that worried him more than her capacity for violence ever could. She blamed herself for being alone. She believed she deserved it. The combat arena at Station Helix 7 had seen thousands of fights over the centuries. But today the air carried a different kind of tension. Cadet Yuna Park stood at the entrance tunnel, rolling her shoulders and stretching her neck from side to side as she waited for the signal to enter. She was small by human standards, barely reaching the shoulder height of most species at the Galactic Academy, and her black hair was pulled back in a tight braid that would not get in her way during what was coming behind her. The rest of Training Cohort 12 watched through the observation windows above the arena floor. There were 23 cadets in total, representing 15 different species from across the Coalition's vast territory. And not one of them had ever served alongside a human before. The Deathworlder is actually going to fight, whispered a Pelian cadet, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she pressed closer to the window. I heard they broke a Gorath's arm during basic orientation last cycle. Another voice added from somewhere in the crowd. That was a different human, someone corrected, though the uncertainty in their voice suggested they were not entirely sure. Commanding Tutor Civics, a Valkyrie who stood nearly 3 meters tall with scales that shifted between deep blue and black depending on her mood, moved to the center of the arena and raised one clawed hand for silence. Her scales were currently in neutral gray, which meant she was in her professional teaching state rather than the darker colors that indicated displeasure. Today begins your mandatory combat assessment, Civics announced, her voice carrying easily through the acoustic design of the space. These evaluations will establish your baseline capabilities and help us design appropriate training regimens for each of you. Yuna stepped onto the arena floor when her name was called, her boots making soft sounds against the impact-absorbing surface across from her. A Gorath cadet named Threk emerged from the opposite tunnel. He was everything the rumors said about his species and more. His exoskeleton gleamed under the arena lights like polished stone, dark brown plates covering every visible part of his body, except for the joints where softer tissue allowed movement. He stood 2.5 meters tall and probably weighed 4 times what Yuna did. His mandibles clicked together in what might have been anticipation or might have been the Gorath equivalent of a confident smile. This seems unbalanced, muttered a crystalline Sheth named Torvin from the observation gallery, his body vibrating with harmonic frequencies that his translator rendered into speech. The human will be seriously injured. Beside him, a small Kesethi named Morel said nothing, but his antennae twitched as he extended his telepathic senses toward the arena floor. He could feel the emotions of both fighters, and something about what he sensed from the human made him tilt his head in confusion. She was not afraid. She was not even nervous, if anything. She seemed almost eager, though that could not possibly be right. Begin, Civex commanded. Stepping back to the edge of the arena, Threk moved first, closing the distance between them with surprising speed for his size. His armored fist swung in a wide arc aimed at Yuna's midsection, a blow that would have shattered the ribs of most species in the galaxy. Yuna was not there when it arrived. She had shifted to the side at the last moment, not with panicked scrambling, but with something that looked almost lazy. As if she had known exactly where the blow would land before Threk had even decided to throw it, the Gorath pressed his attack, launching a series of strikes that forced Yuna to keep moving. She blocked one hit with her forearm, and the sound of impact echoed through the arena like a drum. The watching cadets winced. Her arm should be broken. Torvin observed, his crystalline structure ringing with concern, but Yuna kept moving. Kept blocking, kept dodging. She took hits that should have ended the fight, and knee to her thigh. That made her stumble an elbow across her shoulder. That spun her halfway around a backhand that caught her across the face, and sent her sliding across the arena floor. The gallery fell silent. "It is over," someone said. Though no one could identify the speaker, Threk stood over his fallen opponent, his mandibles clicking in what was clearly satisfaction now, and turned towards Civix to claim his victory. Then Yuna stood up. She rose from the floor with movements that should have been impossible after taking that much punishment. Blood ran from a cut above her eye, and her left arm hung slightly lower than her right, suggesting damage that would have immobilized a Pelion or a Kessethy. But she was standing, and she was smiling. "What is wrong with her?" Morel whispered, his antennae flattening against his skull as he sensed the emotional shift in the arena. It was not bloodlust, though that would have made more sense. It was something he had never felt before from any species. It was joy. The human was enjoying this Threk turned back to face her. And for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his features. Gorath did not show emotion easily through their armored faces, but the way his mandibles stopped clicking spoke volumes. "You should stay down," he said, his translator rendering the words in flat Galactic standard. "Probably," Yuna agreed, wiping blood from her eye with the back of her hand. "But I'm not going to." She moved forward, and something had changed in her stance before. She had been reading him, learning his patterns, absorbing information along with his blows. Now she was ready to use what she had learned. Threk swung again, the same powerful strike that had opened their fight. This time, Yuna did not just dodge. She stepped inside his reach, too close for him to use his size advantage, and drove her elbow into the soft tissue at his joint. The Gorath grunted in surprise and pain. "She found a weakness," Torvin said, his body resonating with something that might have been admiration. Yuna pressed her advantage. She moved like water around Threk's attempts to grab her, striking at joints and gaps in his armor, never staying in one place long enough for him to land a solid hit. She was bleeding from half a dozen places now, and her breathing had grown heavy. But she would not stop, could not stop. The concept simply did not seem to exist for her. Threk grew desperate. His attacks became wilder, less controlled, as exhaustion began to claim him. Gorath were built for explosive power, not sustained combat, and he had expected this fight to last seconds rather than minutes. He made one final charge, putting everything he had into a tackle that would have crushed Yuna against the arena wall. She did not dodge. She planted her feet and met him head-on, using his own momentum to redirect him. Her hands found his arm as he passed, and she twisted her entire body, leveraging him over her hip and down onto the arena floor with a crash that shook the observation windows before he could rise. She had his arm locked against her chest in a position that would break it if she applied pressure. "Yield," she said, and her voice was steady despite her injuries. Threk's mandibles clicked once, twice, and then he slapped the floor with his free hand in the universal gesture of surrender. "Victory to Cadet Park," Civix announced, and her scales had shifted to a pale blue that no one in the cohort had seen before. The gallery remained silent. Yuna released Threk's arm and offered him a hand to help him rise, stared at it for a long moment before accepting, and she pulled him to his feet with strength that seemed impossible given what she had just endured. "Good fight," she said simply. "Yes," Threk replied, and there was something new in his voice. It was. Una turned toward the exit tunnel, and as she walked, she glanced up at the observation gallery. Her eyes swept across the watching cadets. And Morel felt her emotional state shift once more. The joy faded. In its place came something colder, something guarded. She knew they were afraid of her, and that knowledge hurt her more than any of Threk's blows. Morel leaned toward Torvin and whispered, "Something is wrong." "She won," Torvin replied. Confused, "No," Morel said, watching Una disappear into the tunnel below. "Something is wrong with all of us."